Subscribe now, hit like, and drop a comment. Because once you see what's on this tray, you won't look at prison walls the same way again. San Quentin prison food exposed. What California's toughest inmates actually eat. The metal cart rattled down the tier at exactly 5:12 a.m., its echo bouncing off concrete that had heard screams, verdicts, and last words. San Quentin was already awake. Fluorescent lights hummed above rows of steel doors, and the smell hit first. Boiled starch, overcooked protein, something sour that clung to the air. Breakfast wasn't comfort here. It was procedure. Control. And on this morning, it became the spark for something far darker. The tray slid through a slot and clanged onto the floor of cell B214. The man inside didn't touch it. He stared. Pale oatmeal sweating into a plastic bowl, 2 slices of bread pressed flat, a carton stamped with a date that didn't feel right. He'd learned the rules: eat fast, eat quiet, never complain. But he also knew something else. Food at San Quentin had a way of starting fights no guard report could fully explain. Hours later, in the kitchen beneath the yard, steam rose from industrial vats while inmates in hairnets moved in rigid lines. Knives counted. Pans weighed. Every motion watched. The kitchen was one of the most tightly controlled spaces in the prison. Yet rumors traveled faster than any order barked by staff. Missing inventory. Shorted portions. Ingredients swapped without notice. Someone was cutting corners, and in a place where power shifted by the minute, that mattered. By noon, the yard buzzed with whispers. An inmate collapsed near the benches, clutching his stomach, eyes glassy. Medics rushed in, radios crackling. The official line would come later: heat, dehydration, but the timing raised questions. Others complained of nausea. A guard noted a pattern: the same unit, the same meal. Investigators would eventually look at logs and menus, but inside the walls, the verdict came quicker. Food wasn't just fuel, it was leverage. It decided who owed whom, who snapped, who survived the day. And when trust in the tray disappeared, everything else followed. That evening, a locked storage room off the kitchen was opened for an unscheduled count. Boxes stacked wrong. Labels mismatched. A clipboard fell, scattering papers across the floor. At the bottom of the pile was a delivery receipt that didn't belong, dated weeks earlier, signed by no one anyone recognized. The kitchen went silent. Because if that receipt was real, it meant San Quentin's meals weren't just cheap or careless. They were compromised. And whoever made that decision had put lives at risk. By dawn, San Quentin was locked down tighter than usual. The yard stayed empty, meals delayed, doors sealed. Officially, it was a routine security adjustment. Inside, everyone knew better. Something had gone wrong, and the food cart was at the center of it. Lieutenant Harris stood in the kitchen office, staring at the receipt under harsh blue-white lights. The paper was thin, cheap, nothing like the standard documentation required for prison suppliers. No barcode. No vendor ID. Just a handwritten quantity and a signature that didn't exist in the system. Harris had worked corrections for 20 years. He'd seen stabbings, riots, suicides, but this unsettled him more. Because food was supposed to be the one thing that followed the rules. Interviews began immediately. Kitchen workers were pulled one by one into a narrow room that smelled of disinfectant and cold coffee. Most said the same thing: they followed orders, cooked what they were given, kept their heads down. But inconsistencies crept in. One inmate mentioned a delivery that arrived late at night, escorted not by the usual staff but by a single officer he didn't recognize. Another recalled boxes already opened, contents repackaged before anyone could log them. Meanwhile, the medical unit filled up. Complaints spread across 2 cell houses: stomach pain, dizziness, vomiting. Nothing fatal, not yet, but enough to trigger alarms at headquarters. An external inspector was notified. That's when the pressure truly started. Records didn't line up. Menus approved by the state listed ingredients that never appeared in the kitchen inventory. Protein portions were smaller than reported. Nutritional counts were inflated. Someone had been falsifying paperwork, and they'd been doing it for months. Outside the walls, rumors leaked. A local reporter caught wind of contaminated meals and started asking questions. Phones rang non-stop in the warden's office. The story was threatening to spill beyond San Quentin, and once that happened, control would be gone. Inside, tension snapped. An argument in the chow line turned violent when an inmate accused another of skimming food from trays. Guards intervened fast, batons raised, but the message was clear: trust had collapsed. Hunger sharpened every edge. Late that night, Harris reviewed security footage from the loading bay. Most of it was routine: trucks arriving, gates opening, paperwork exchanged. Then he saw it. A delivery van parked just outside the main camera's range. The timestamp didn't match any scheduled drop. For less than 4 minutes, the rear doors opened. Boxes were unloaded. No inspection. No log. The officer on duty that night? Transferred. Paperwork approved by a supervisor who retired early the following week. Harris leaned back, pulse racing. This wasn't negligence. It was coordination. And if someone inside San Quentin was manipulating the food supply, the question wasn't just why. It was who was next to pay the price. By the third day, San Quentin felt like it was holding its breath. Meals resumed, but no one trusted them. Trays slid through slots untouched. Some inmates traded food for cigarettes, others refused to eat at all. Hunger became a weapon, quiet, corrosive, and spreading fast. Lieutenant Harris wasn't sleeping. He'd traced the suspicious delivery route back through archived logs, cross-checking gate records with overtime sheets. One name kept surfacing in the margins, never centered, never obvious: Officer Daniel Mercer. Mid-level custody. Clean record. The kind of officer supervisors described as reliable because he never made noise. Mercer had worked 6 night shifts during unauthorized delivery windows. Each time, the cameras covering the secondary loading lane were offline for maintenance. That alone would have raised alarms, except maintenance requests had been signed off by someone higher up. Someone who knew how to bury anomalies in routine. Before Harris could push further, Mercer vanished. Didn't show for roll call. Didn't answer his phone. His badge pinged out at the East Employee Gate at 3:12 a.m., then never again. No resignation. No exit paperwork. Just gone. That's when the FBI stepped in. Federal agents combed through financial records while state officials scrambled to contain the fallout. What they found cracked the case wider than anyone expected. Mercer wasn't acting alone. Small payments, too small to trigger audits, had been moving through shell vendors tied to prison food contracts. Not millions. Thousands. Enough to matter inside prison walls. The food wasn't poisoned. It was manipulated. Cheap substitutes replaced approved ingredients. Expired meat relabeled. Nutritional counts falsified so budgets could be skimmed without raising flags. The missing money funneled through fake delivery companies, then kicked back to insiders. It was slow theft, buried under bureaucracy, and it had been happening for years. But the real danger wasn't financial. Medical staff confirmed malnutrition indicators across multiple units: weight loss, weakened immune responses, delayed healing. In a prison already stretched thin, that kind of systemic neglect turned minor conflicts into lethal ones. A fight over food wasn't just about hunger. It was about survival. As agents closed in, Mercer resurfaced, arrested 2 counties away during a traffic stop. In the trunk of his car, forged documents, burner phones, and a San Quentin delivery manifest dated 2 weeks in the future. Under interrogation, he broke fast. He wasn't the architect. Just the courier. The system, he said, made it easy. No one questioned food. No one wanted to. Back at San Quentin, word spread quickly. Inmates realized the trays weren't just bad, they were evidence. Guards felt exposed. Administrators went silent. And Harris understood the final truth. The most dangerous thing inside San Quentin hadn't been the inmates. It was the system that fed them. The arrests made headlines, but inside San Quentin, nothing felt resolved. If anything, the silence was louder. The kitchen kept running. Trays kept sliding through steel slots. But now every meal carried suspicion, like a threat disguised as routine. Federal oversight arrived with clipboards and promises. Inspectors photographed freezers, weighed portions, reviewed invoices. On paper, everything started to look cleaner. New vendors. New procedures. Freshly printed guidelines taped to stainless steel walls. But prisons don't change overnight, and neither do the instincts of the people trapped inside them. In the weeks that followed, violence didn't spike. It calcified. Inmates withdrew, conserving energy, watching guards with hollow eyes. Hunger had taught them patience. The kind that waits. Lieutenant Harris testified before an internal review board, laying out how negligence had been normalized. How shortcuts became policy. How food, something meant to sustain, had been quietly weaponized by indifference. His testimony never named every name, but it didn't need to. The message was clear. San Quentin's problems weren't caused by a few bad actors. They were enabled by a system that stopped looking. Officer Mercer took a plea deal. In exchange for cooperation, his sentence was reduced. In closed hearings, he named supervisors, contractors, middlemen. Some resigned before charges could be filed. Others were reassigned. No one at the top went to prison. That detail didn't go unnoticed. Months later, a former inmate gave an interview after his release. He described the meals in a single sentence that stuck with everyone who heard it. They didn't starve us to kill us. They starved us to remind us we didn't matter. Medical reports confirmed long-term damage for dozens of inmates, conditions that would follow them long after their sentences ended. Lawsuits were filed. Settlements reached quietly. The state moved on. San Quentin remained. The walls still loomed over the bay. The kitchen still hummed before dawn. Somewhere inside, a tray slid across metal, carrying food that met every regulation, every calorie requirement. Technically acceptable. Legally compliant. But the damage had already been done. Because the story wasn't really about food. It never was. It was about what happens when accountability disappears behind locked doors. When oversight becomes a checkbox. When human beings are reduced to line items on a budget spreadsheet. The most chilling truth wasn't that inmates had been fed poorly. It was that for years, everyone knew, and no one stopped it. And if it could happen at San Quentin, one of the most watched prisons in America, it could happen anywhere. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.